Tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui ki tēnei wānanga. Kia ora, my name is David Downs. I am your host for this next 30 minutes, and welcome. It's really nice to have you here. We're talking now about the impact of COVID-19, but it's actually really more about how teams work. The session is called Supporting Wellness for Remote Teams During COVID-19. And I guess reflecting on this, COVID-19's had a massive impact on every organisation globally. And it's one thing to have a big organisation where you can walk through the halls and talk to people or pick up the phone in the same time zone or drop something around to their home or whatever it might be. It's a whole nother level of complexity when you're trying to support teams who are geographically dispersed, maybe in different cities, even different countries, different time zones, different languages, different cultures. And really that's what we're reflecting on tonight in this session, is really what are some best practices that we've seen around supporting the wellness of teams through the COVID-19 period. But as I say, it's something that you can apply to other crises or other ways of managing teams as well. And I'm joined tonight by three experts in managing remote teams. All of us are New Zealanders, and we're going to talk about that in a moment too. But let me first introduce you to Dan Mathieson. Dan is the CEO or Chief Executive of Zespri, which is New Zealand's kiwifruit marketing company. He's been there since 2017. His career has spanned nearly 18 years with the most recent role as President of Global Sales and Marketing. He's led the sales and marketing operations in offshore markets and in new markets. He's growing new markets all the time. Zespri is the world's leading distributor and marketer of kiwifruit, and the company sells kiwifruit into more than 59 countries, so maybe 60 countries, I don't know. More than 59 it says here. And Dan is joining us from China. He's got 21 countries around the world where they do business. So Dan, welcome, thanks for joining us. Ni hao ma.
Great to be here.
Joining Dan, we have Clare Wilson. Clare is based in Singapore, so we really are jumping around the globe. Based in Singapore, Clare leads New Zealand Trade and Enterprises work in overseas markets. So NZTE, New Zealand Trade and Enterprises, New Zealand government's trade agency, if you like, and they're based in 43 offices across 7 regions. Clare leads that team based in Singapore. She's formerly been a regional director of East Asia and of Australia Pacific, and she was the Trade Commissioner and Consul General to Italy, based in Milan, so she likes to travel around, clearly. And before that, she held a number of senior roles at St John's, which is a healthcare organisation here in New Zealand, Tourism Holdings, and Auckland Rugby, and she's co-founded startups as well. So welcome, Clare, from Singapore.
Kia ora tātou, great to be here.
And joining them from the much less exotic, at least for us, location of Auckland, New Zealand, where I am as well, is Emma Loisel. Emma currently chairs Volcano Coffee Works, which is a company she co-founded in 2010. Volcano Coffee Works is a specialist coffee roastery, sort of a specialist, beautiful craft place based in Brixton in London, but she's here in New Zealand, so how does that work? And they provide ethically traded coffee to cafes, restaurants, hotels, etc., direct to consumer as well as into the trade. The business is both carbon neutral and a B Corp, so she's got that, I suppose, that values-based way of doing business at the core. She's passionate about doing business. In addition to that work, she's on the board of Kia, which is New Zealand's expat association, and of Karma Drinks, which is another ethically sourced drinks company. She's also a regular mentor at the London's Business School's Entrepreneur Summer Program. Welcome in lockdown in Auckland, Emma.
Kia ora, thank you for having me.
Thank you. So the three of you are leading global teams from different parts of the world, all with a connection to New Zealand. And we're going to talk a little bit tonight about, first of all, the experience of leading teams in this geographically dispersed way. Secondly, about the way that you've helped or thought about wellness through the COVID crisis, and what does that mean, and what can we learn from it. But what I want to start with is just reflect a little bit about where you are right now and why, and what sort of teams you have. I mean, I gave a very poor introduction, but Dan, I know you're in Yunnan province at the moment, 2 hours out of a major city at some roadside cafe or something. Tell us about why. How does the CEO of a kiwifruit company end up in the middle of China?
Yeah, well, look, I'm actually in a farmhouse, a berry farmhouse, so not kiwi fruit at all, but berries down in the southern part of China. Driscoll's berries, actually. Driscoll's is one of our competitors, but they've been kind enough to host us here to teach us a little bit about how they're growing berries down here. Look, I came to China just about 7 weeks ago, and really two reasons. Firstly, to just check in with the team. They've had it tough over the last couple of years with all ranges of lockdowns and restrictions. So I wanted to make sure that I was staying connected to the big team we have here of over 80 people. And then also with a mind on the future, start to look at how we can come up with a model to grow kiwi fruit here in China to allow us to achieve our 12-month supply ambition. We've got offices all around the world, as you mentioned, David. We're in sort of 20 countries. We've got major locations across Europe, across here in China, and Singapore is our global sales and marketing hub. We've got an office in California, and of course our head office in New Zealand. Look, the pandemic itself has really impacted us. Sort of two halves, I guess. On the positive side, kiwi fruit has become a really popular food item. Consumers around the world have wanted to eat healthier and nutritious and look after their health more and more, and kiwi fruit has fitted in perfectly to that, and we've seen growing demand for our fruit. On the other side, we've also seen massive disruption, and you could break that down into two areas. Firstly, people. We're going to talk a lot about people today. We've seen just unmeasurable levels of anxiety and concern built up over this last couple of years. And that's really playing on people's minds, on people's mental health. So that's been an area of real impact and something we're working really hard on. And then the second has been the business disruption in general. Borders shut down, people unable to move freely. That's had an impact on our ability to get fruit out of New Zealand to market. We're a small country with a small number of people. We rely on people coming in. And then also disruption across the value chain with high inflationary costs skyrocketing much faster than forecast, and disruption through our shipping lines, which New Zealand relies on so heavily. So we've had a lot of impact across people and business. And so I've been trying to get out and see the teams and reassure them that we're hopefully coming towards the back end of this and looking forward to the future.
That's great. I mean, that disruption about the economy has really overshadowed a lot of the people impact, and yet, you know, people are at the core of every business. And I know New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, more than half of the organisation is remote, lives outside of New Zealand. And Clare, you lead this team from Singapore, based in Singapore, but across the globe. Tell us a little bit about the team that you lead and the impact that COVID's had.
Yes, thanks, David. And look, I think really building on what Dan's saying, all of that and more, with 43 offices around the world, 330 people. Obviously, COVID, it's been a journey for the last couple of years, and a number of markets are still in very severe lockdown situations. So obviously, we had to move quickly as the pandemic took hold. Our companies were unable to travel to market, unable to get insights, and so we really had to step up and provide the eyes and ears on the ground back to our New Zealand companies, and doing all of that obviously online on Zoom, and doing that when our people were managing themselves, dealing with all of the uncertainty and anxiety that COVID brought. Having to work from home for for some of them 18, 19 months, with young families managing their home life and their often elderly parents, as well as providing a lot of support to New Zealand businesses. It was a really challenging time. We were asking our teams to step up, as well as acknowledging the anxiety and the unknown that COVID brought. So it was a really important period, really challenging period, and you know, our people were at the heart of all of that.
Yeah, and I've lived in Singapore, and those apartments are pretty small. Living in one of them for 18 months without leaving is going to be a pretty difficult circumstance. So you got a lot of impact. Emma, slightly different scale for you. You've got the organisation mostly based in the UK, but you're based in New Zealand. You must spend a lot of time up at night, I suppose. But tell us about the impact for you.
So we're probably quite a different business. We are 30 coffee specialists, and I'm the only one that's not based in the UK. So I've actually been living the life of COVID for 4 years since I moved back to New Zealand, and have been running the business from here. So perhaps that was an advantage when COVID hit. I was used to working on Zoom, but I would go up to the office every 12 weeks before COVID, and of course for 18 months I couldn't get there physically. So that had a huge impact on my ability to how to really manage the team. But we have a really committed team. Our business was at that time of COVID was 95% wholesale to cafes, restaurants. We had to very quickly pivot our business into direct to consumer, we had fortunately started conversations with the grocery as well, or supermarkets. And so that those two channels are where we put our efforts and our focus. But I think, and the UK had a funny situation with their furlough system, where you had all these people who you had to leave on the bench. You know, it was like in one of the biggest crises of the UK market, we had to send everyone on holiday, which just seemed completely mad. So we had 9 people having to do the job of 30 to enable us to get through. We did. The business has come out thriving, but I think what's interesting is it also means during that, because of the pivot of the business, of course, the team had to change as well, because there were different skills that were needed, the different priorities in the business, etc. So as the business economy around us was in COVID was transforming the market, our business was having to transform and change engines in flight. So that's also actually really disruptive for a team when you're having to go, well, what is the future of the business, and what people are going to be here and who wants to be here, and actually managing those through. It's been a really long, heavy, hard process. But I'm incredibly proud of how they've come out, and we have the core team are with us and have evolved. But I think actually it's important to look at teams at times like this and go, it's actually okay, and it's how you let people move through your business and remain ambassadors of your business when they're moving on to things, because often a change is as good as a rest, and everyone is exhausted through COVID, and this is going to hang with us for many, many months, if not years to come. So what we're focusing on at the moment is how to really, we've revitalized the business. Now it's how do we revitalize the people and enable them to do what's right for them personally and as well as for the business and for their careers.
That's a really interesting point, because you get to this idea of, people have sort of staggered their way through. In a kind of crisis mode, they've managed to get through the last 18 months to deliver, a business that's still operating. And Dan, you must have this, but now you've got people who are physically and mentally exhausted, emotionally wrought, but you've got to keep going. Business doesn't just stop because you've got through this first part of this crisis. Dan, how do you keep the team motivated and keep them focused and give them rest?
I do think that's a really important point. And, the traditional way of looking at this is that you encourage employees to go on holiday. So off you go on holiday, recharge. We've had a tough season. You're going to have a couple of weeks off, and then you're going to come back and get into it all over again. And I think the way of the future is not that. Actually, we're going to have to allow people to be able to manage their lives better on a day-to-day basis and get that recharge and energy in a sustainable way. I think, looking forward to the Christmas holiday is not going to do it in the future. And I think we've learnt that through COVID, because the stresses are bigger, they're coming at us all the time. And so we've got to find ways to build into our daily schedule ways of refresh, of recharge. And I learned this, I was reading this book the other day, and I heard this great story about these 2 lumberjacks. And I'm not sure if you've heard this story, but these 2 lumberjacks are cutting wood every day, and they work the same 9 to 5 every day. But one lumberjack, he cuts a lot more wood than the other lumberjack, and the other lumberjack's looking at this and he can't work out how he's done it. And so one day he says to the lumberjack, look, I start at the same time as you every day, I work the same hours, and yet you're always cutting more wood than me. And he said, I want to know how you do it. And he said, well, it's easy. And this lumberjack, he goes home for an hour every day. Sorry, I missed the key point of the story. But the lumberjack goes, well, how do you go home every day and still cut more wood than me? And he said, it's easy. I go home and I sharpen my axe. And that's, I think, the purpose of what we've got to try and achieve with our people, is that they're building in that ability to go home, to refresh, to recharge, and to create that more stable sense of mental well-being, physical well-being, not just looking forward to the next holiday, but building it into their daily work. And that's what we're trying to do at Zespri. So we've implemented FlexWell through the pandemic. That was something we wanted to do anyway, which gives people the ability to work from home whenever they want. Of course, COVID forced us to do that, and it's been a blessing in disguise, because now we trust people, we empower people more, and they're more accountable working from home and taking on the responsibility themselves. And that means that they can help control their own schedule and control their own lives better. So I think that's one thing that we're doing at Zespri to try and help create that balance.
Love
I think the second thing is Boost. We've brought in Boost, where we're really trying to support each other, share stories about how through giving, through learning, through exercise, through better sleep, through better diets, we're actually trying to be, more balanced as people and more sustainable in our roles. And I think they're just two of the things that we're focusing on to try and answer that big question of how can you help people sustain a good sense of well-being going forward.
I love that, and I've just worked out that the axe is a metaphor, isn't it, for rest? Sorry, Emma, did you want to say something? I worked it out.
I think what Daniel says about the first program that you called Flex Well. Is that what you called it?
Yes, we did, yeah.
Yeah, because I think one of the interesting things about flexible working policies that I've always found challenging, this was pre-COVID, is that it's a bit of an oxymoron, a flexible working policy, because actually every flex is different. Every employee needs a different, and it's just like young children. As soon as you figured out their routine, they go and change it on you, right? So you've got to be able to change all the time. So to create a policy that actually isn't set, this is what flexible working is, but you can flex.
You must flex between the hours of 1 and 2 p.m. and you can't flex on a Tuesday afternoon or something. So you've got to allow flex within your policy, let alone the policy itself. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because someone said to me once that, you hire employees, but then human beings turn up with all of their frailties and foibles and complexity and issues with their kids and whatever it might be. So I know NZTE, New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, Clare, thinks about this a lot too, and how you account for different work styles, different time zones, different practices that people have. What are some of the things that you've been working on?
Yeah, a lot of what Dan talked about, we've certainly been leaning into, and I think in some ways it has been a blessing because it has proven that we can operate all remotely, and many offices will continue to do so for all the wrong reasons, unfortunately, for a long time. Now the offices that are starting to open, people are loving the opportunity to come back and engage with each other face to face and our customers. That's just a joy, as well as saying actually there's times where it makes sense for me to be at home, and that's totally the way it should be. So I think we're going to come out of this with quite a different working model, and that's pretty exciting. And again, it comes back to control by the employee, the person, about what works for them, because obviously COVID took a lot of choice out of our lives, and I think bringing that back is a pretty powerful piece. We've done a lot of work around support of our families around how they can work from home and make sure that there is time for their little people, and that, like I say, that's been a couple of years that's been going on for. So bringing in some specialists to talk about tips and tricks, putting guardrails around when they work and when they don't, feeling okay about saying no. That stuff is, I mean, it sounds pretty easy, but it's hard, and it's hard when you work in an organisation that's 24/7 around the world. So people being, I think having guardrails to say, right, I'm stopping now and I'll come back when it suits me is a really powerful skill that we're learning.
Is there,
David, just also touch on a couple of things there, because I thought they're really important points. One that Emma mentioned around what we did at Zespri was we didn't sit in an ivory tower and came up with a FlexWell policy that the executives thought was great. We actually went out to our employees and we said, what would make sense for you going forward? Trying to take in all the different perspectives and angles, because as Emma said, it's just so different. And actually we built the policy based on the feedback that we got through both qualitative and survey responses. And actually then people felt invested in it, they felt part of building it, and then we were able to fine tune it and make it better and better. So I thought that was a really good point that Emma made, and I actually think the way we did it actually helped us implement it in a really successful way. And just the point that Claire touched on then, because again it's a really important point. When you have people working from home, it actually can create more stress, more anxiety, and more trouble if you don't actually help them with best practice, and you actually don't think about providing them with frameworks to think about how they can get the best out of being at home and connecting to work, or vice versa. And so we're spending a lot of time on that at the moment, again, going out, surveying employees, getting their feedback, so that we're continuously fine-tuning this new blurred line between family and work, home and work. And more, I believe, and Emma and Claire might think differently, but more and more I believe that the actual role of the organisation is actually to support more outside the normal working hours. Whereas before it was quite separate. And I think now the organisation, if they really want to support their employees, they really want their employees to bring the best every day, they're going to actually have to understand those employees more. They're going to have to understand their people better so they understand the stresses and the troubles they have when they leave the office. And I think there's a real role there for the organisation to play more. And certainly that's something that we're trying to discuss with our team at Zespri.
Yeah, I've noticed lots of teams and organisations that I've seen bad habits have crept in, where because you're working from home, you can take a call at 7 o'clock, or you do send an email at night, and it's sort of become this. The blurred lines have become very blurred. It was okay when there was a crisis, but now that it's just normal, people have got to have these frameworks. And I wonder if there's a sort of a cultural part to this. Both organisational culture, but also country culture. You all work in organisations that cross multiple cultural boundaries. Claire, how do you think about that with the different teams there? For some cultures, it's expected that you work very hard. For others, it's understood when you can withdraw.
Yeah, look, and that's been a really interesting piece for the last couple of years, particularly as we think of the wellness programs that we have co-created and introduced. In some markets, it's people love it. They feel very comfortable sharing quite personal journeys with others, and other cultures that's certainly not something that is that normal. So I think we've all been on quite a journey here about finding a safe place that actually some real benefits. Some markets are a lot further ahead working this way than others, but there's been some real wins here where I think one silver lining in COVID, and there are some, is that our teams are far closer and tighter, and our level of comfort in all markets. Asia is probably one that has taken longer for people to speak up and form that level of intimacy with their colleagues than they've had before. I think we've come a long way, and I don't think that'll change because as we start to come back to a new normal, I think that's a really positive step. But for that to continue, we have to continue to invest in it. So that onus is very much on us as well, I think. There's some real gold in here that we do want to celebrate.
There is. And I was thinking back that, Emma, you've been doing this for 4 years. You said this style of management. You must have developed some techniques as a leader on how you think about supporting remote teams in different time zones, for example. Have you got any good tips and tricks for those people?
You've got to have good people in market. That's key. But the thing is about empowering them. It's empowering them to make decisions without checking back in with you. Because I'm asleep, you can't get hold of me at that time of the morning. So and that's about empowering them to understand that if they make the wrong decision, thankfully we're not heart surgeons, so no one's going to die on the operating table. There's very little we can't unwind together if we really think that was a rubbish idea. But most of the time, it's a really good idea, and often one that I didn't think of. So actually, it's really about empowering your team to lead beside you. And I like to lead from the centre of my people. And so really that's something. And I had to do that before the pandemic, but it absolutely accelerated during the pandemic. I said to everyone, I don't know what's going to happen. So someone may as well make a decision. And we had interns in our team of 9 out of 30 that we kept on. One was an intern because she knew how to use Facebook. And I was like, we need you. So it was, it's really interesting. You remove all the barriers of, seniority. Everyone has a voice at the table. And that's something we're really keeping within the business. But I think also it's this thing about building teams for the future, which is, I agree, there's some real gold, Claire, in this. But we come from an environment where we went and chose our people. People are now choosing their companies to work for. The power is shifting to the employee, and I think in a really positive way. It's like the consumer power. They're choosing the brands they support that support their ethos, because no longer is the company something they do between 9 and 5 and then they go home and have a different life. They're very integrated. And so that to me is really important for companies to start looking at themselves and going, what actually do we stand for? What are we doing? And for me, what the pandemic gave me was time to do things I've been wanting to do with our business for the last 3 years, which was carbon neutral and B Corp. And B Corp was something I felt we ran a B Corp, but I wanted to find out. And I had the time to actually sit there in the middle of the night and do the 350 questionnaires, which is really hard work, but actually really thrilled. And then they say, ask your sustainability manager. I'll be like, oh, that'd be me again. And so, but actually it's given the framework for our people to really, and I didn't do it for this reason, but our people have really been thrilled to get behind it and see it as value.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And the way you describe it's really important. The alignment, the purpose. We've heard a lot about the Great Resignation, particularly in the US and places like that, where people have come through this pandemic and are saying exactly like you say, my work and my life are now integrated. I want to make choices about my whole piece, and maybe I'm not doing the right thing. So, Dan, I thought it's really important for you too, in the cultures that you work across, to understand the different motivators and drivers and the different factors that, you've got teams all around the world. How do you think about applying those sorts of lenses, of the different culture lenses to it?
Oh, look, very similar to what Emma and Claire have just said. Gone are the days also that employee choose the company they want to work for based on the product alone. They now want to understand the purpose of that organisation. Are they really committing to help the bigger goals, the social challenges, the environmental challenges, and are they really walking the talk? It's not just a poster on a wall, but are you committing investment and time and projects and developing teams around it and really building it into your purpose? So I think that's going to become more important in this war, I guess, if you like, which is not a good word, but for talent. And exceptional people. They want to work for exceptional organisations that have an exceptional purpose, where they really feel they're going to be doing good in the world. And organisations that do that well will attract great people. So certainly something that we're focused on in a very big way at Zespri. Culture and values are mission critical. We've known that for some time, but through the pandemic, it's just become even more acute than before. We spent a long time at Zespri developing our target culture, developing our values together as an organisation of 850 people. And we're continuously workshopping and evolving that as our business grows, bringing in the different cultural elements. Our business in China is growing more. Our European business is growing into more different locations and countries. And so we're wanting to feed in all of that, those nuances, those differences, the diversity, as we continue to evolve our culture over time. We want to have clear values, and our values are around, being results driven, but also having a really strong focus on kaitiakitanga and guardianship. And at its core, all of this is built on incredible personal connections, really understanding the people that are sitting next to you, the people that are sitting across the world from you that you're working with on teams. What are their ambitions? What are their concerns? What are their fears? And how to give feedback to one another and build a deeper relationship. So those three values are really important to us, but they are quite different in the different markets, and we allow localization. We've built them together at the high level, but then we allow our teams in Japan and China and Europe to work on what does that mean for them in the local environment. And we've got some really good results there with clear behaviours and actions coming out of those discussions. And I think that's served us in really good stead through the pandemic. It's kind of that's been our binding, our glue that's pulled us together and allowed us to make decisions quickly, communicate transparently, and to find solutions to some of the big challenges that have been coming up. So that's something we'll continue to invest in.
That's wonderful. I just love that idea. I mean, you mentioned it earlier that, with the blend of home and personal life, you see people more as their entire human selves, and so you've got to adapt. We're coming up to the end of time, so I'm going to ask you one question each, a rapid fire, which is the scenario. There's people watching this who have teams remotely around the world and they're worried about their wellness. Based on your experience, what's one practical thing that you could do or they could do if they're watching this as a leader to support that wellness? What's the thing they could do tomorrow that would help make an impact for the wellness of their team? And I'm going to go to you first, Emma, because you've been doing it for 4 years, so you've got 2 years head start on the rest of them. What's one practical tip?
I think it's actually something what Daniel said, it's ask them. We're dreadful at asking for feedback in New Zealand, and actually asking for feedback and people being able to say openly, honestly, what's right for them, you'll be amazed with what they come up with. And 90% of the time, it doesn't cost you anything. It's actually more about an adjustment that enables them to live and work in a much more productive and fulfilled manner.
Fantastic, love it. Ask them. Dan, you're up next. What's your tip or trick for practical one?
I was going to say exactly the same thing, and in order to be able to do that well, you have to create what Claire said earlier, which is that safe environment. So, people have to feel safe that when they share themselves, they share their stories, their vulnerabilities, that you're going to listen, that you're going to treat it with care and respect, and that's going to actually move towards a positive outcome. I've got a hairy face at the moment. That's Movember, not my normal style.
I thought you were dressing like a kiwi
important.
fruit for us. I think it was the part of the plan.
So these are important. In Movember, we've got these really beautiful human stories coming out at the moment as to how people are feeling right now, about their mental health, about the struggles they're having, about the struggles their friends are having or their families are having. And that allows us to build closer relationships. That allows us to see more visibly when people are really suffering. And then that allows us to take action from that. Companies aren't experts in mental health. They're not most of them. It sounds like Emma's company is well on the way, but I know at Zespri we're not. We don't have the capability built into our business, but if we can see the signs, if we can feel how people are feeling, we can help direct them in the right direction. We can help get them support so that they can find ways to then hopefully get their mental well-being, physical well-being back into a great place.
Perfect, thank you. And Claire, last word for you. What's your practical tip or trick?
Tricky one being the last. Oh, I guess manaakitanga really embraces everything that we have just been talking about. It is that care of people, that respect, that acknowledgement that they may not be okay, and that we don't have all the answers. That in fact this is a co-creation. This is an incredibly unusual situation that we are all living through, and we build it together. So I guess it really just incorporates particularly what Emma, and Dan said there. It's manaakitanga.
Manaakitanga, beautiful word of care for people, respect, reciprocity. Wonderful to have three incredible leaders. If the three of you are hiring at the moment, I imagine there are people watching this who would love to work for your organisations. You demonstrate really good behavioural leadership behaviours. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to our three leaders for sharing some great tips and tricks. It's been wonderful to be part of the APEC CEO Summit. Pō Mārie, kia kaha.